long before people, long before animals, even long before plants, there was only a young Earth. The world was hot, wild, and dangerous. Volcanoes exploded again and again. The ground was covered in lava. Rocks cracked as the planet slowly cooled. This is where Australia's story begins. Not as a country, not even as a continent, but as small pieces of land hidden inside a fiery world. Deep underground, tiny crystals formed. They were called zircon. These little minerals are like time capsules. They hold clues about the Earth from more than 4 billion years ago. Scientists found them in a place called Jack Hills in Western Australia. That means the land that would one day become Australia is home to some of the oldest materials on Earth. Back then, while meteorites were crashing down from space, these crystals stayed strong. They saw everything. As millions of years passed, the surface of the Earth changed. Pieces of solid land, called cratons, slowly formed. These cratons are like the bones of a continent, strong, stable, and hard to break. In the west, one of the oldest cratons appeared, the Yilgarn Craton. To the north, another piece, called the Pilbara Craton, grew. Over time, these blocks collided and stuck together. Like puzzle pieces joining, they created the ancient heart of Australia. This heart is still there today. It has survived longer than almost any other part of the Earth's crust. At that time, Earth's surface looked nothing like it does now. The air and oceans were changing. Simple life, tiny cells began to spread. But while everything above shifted, the cratons below remained steady. They became the strong foundation that would hold up the continent for billions of years. Hundreds of millions of years later, Australia didn't stand alone. It was part of a huge supercontinent called Gondwana. Gondwana joined together Australia, Antarctica, Africa, South America, and India. It stretched from the poles to near the equator. Around 600 million years ago, this land saw ice and sea at the same time. Near the poles, glaciers scraped across the rocks. We can still see the marks they left in the Flinders Ranges. In other areas, shallow seas cover the land. In these seas, something amazing was happening. Tiny life forms called cyanobacteria built layered mounds on the seafloor. These mounds are known as stromatolites. They may not look special, but they change the world. By slowly releasing oxygen, they filled the oceans and the air with the gas that animals and humans need to breathe. They were the quiet builders of the world we live in. Then about 541 million years ago, life exploded in the oceans in what scientists call the Cambrian explosion. Suddenly, many new creatures appeared. Some had shells, some had eyes, some became hunters, others hid from them. It was the beginning of complex animal life. In South Australia, in a place called the Ediacara Hills, fossils from this time are still preserved in the rocks. They show soft-bodied creatures with strange shapes, fronds, discs, and patterns unlike anything alive today. These fossils give us a window into a world long gone. Australia was not just a bystander during this time. It was one of the places where life was taking its first big steps. After this, during a time called the Devonian period, around 400 million years ago, the center of Australia was covered by warm, shallow seas. Coral reefs grew, and fish filled the waters. Some fish developed jaws. Others grew strong fins that would eventually become legs. In these seas, some of the first animals took the bold step of crawling from water onto land. This would shape the history of all life to come. Meanwhile, the Earth's surface kept moving. Plates of rock pushed against each other, folding and lifting to make mountains. In different regions, huge mountain ranges rose where Australia's crust collided with other parts of the Earth. These mountains were once as tall as the Himalayas. Today they are worn down to hills, but deep underground, their roots still hold the memory of those massive forces. Time kept flowing. Dinosaurs appeared. The supercontinent Gondwana began to break apart. Around 180 million years ago, deep cracks formed, and the pieces of Gondwana slowly drifted away from each other. Australia was still connected to Antarctica, but they were beginning to separate. During this time, forests of ferns and conifers covered the land. Dinosaurs wandered through them, leaving their footprints in what is now Queensland. Those prints remain, pressed into stone, reminders of a lost world. The split happened very slowly. No creature alive then could have noticed it. But over millions of years, Australia began its journey northward, away from Antarctica and the rest of Gondwana. This journey would eventually leave it alone, surrounded by ocean and isolated from the rest of the world. But here, at the beginning of the story, what matters most is the foundation. Australia was born in fire and rock. It was shaped by crashing continents and rising seas. Its stones carry the memory of Earth's earliest times. Long before people, before animals, even before plants, this land was waiting. It was being built, piece by piece, by the slow and powerful forces of the planet. Australia's long journey was only beginning. Around 85 million years ago, the land slowly began to pull away from Antarctica. The two continents had once been joined as part of Gondwana, but now, deep cracks in the Earth's crust were opening. Bit by bit, water filled the spaces between them. Australia started to drift north, like a giant ship moving through time. For a while, it still sat close to Antarctica. But about 45 million years ago, the final land bridge broke. Australia separated completely and began to move quickly, at about the speed that human fingernails grow. It may sound slow, but in the world of continents, this was fast. Isolation changes everything. Once cut off from the rest of the world, plants and animals here had to face life on their own. No new species could easily arrive from other continents. This gave Australia a unique story, one unlike any other place on Earth. At first, the world was warm and wet. Australia was covered in thick rainforests. Giant trees stretched high into the sky. Ferns and vines filled the ground. In these forests, animals moved through the shadows. This was a time when strange and wonderful creatures lived here. There were early marsupials, mammals that carry their babies in pouches, exploring the trees and forest floor. There were also monotremes, egg-laying mammals like the ancestors of the platypus and echidna. These animals were living fossils, keeping ancient ways alive. Rivers flowed through green valleys. The air was thick with the calls of birds and insects. Because Australia was now separate from the rest of the world, its animals evolved differently. In other places, placental mammals like dogs, cats, horses, and monkeys took over. But in Australia, marsupials filled nearly every role. Some became hunters, others became grazers. Some lived in trees, while others dug into the ground. They adapted to every kind of environment. One powerful example was the thylacoleo, the marsupial lion. It had sharp teeth and strong jaws, and it became one of the top predators. Giant kangaroos and wombat-like animals grew large on the open plains. Platypuses swam in forest streams, just as their relatives do today. Each of these animals tells part of the story of a land cut off, evolving in its own way. But the world was changing. Australia's northward drift had another effect. Around 34 million years ago, a major event reshaped the climate. A deep ocean passage opened between Antarctica and South America. This allowed a cold current to flow all the way around Antarctica, a powerful ring of water called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This current isolated Antarctica, causing it to freeze. As Antarctica grew icy, the whole planet cooled. Rainforests that had once stretched across Australia began to shrink. Slowly, they pulled back toward the coasts. In the middle of the continent, the land grew drier. Deserts began to form where once there had been lush forests. This drying didn't happen overnight. It took millions of years. But the plants and animals had to keep adapting as their world changed around them. The green heart of Australia turned into the red center we know today. Winds carried dust across wide plains. Rivers that had once flowed year-round turned into dry channels for much of the year. Many animals responded to these changes in remarkable ways. Kangaroos developed strong legs to travel long distances across open spaces. They could survive with little water and feed on dry grasses. Koalas stayed in the shrinking eucalyptus forests, relying on a very specific diet. Echidnas learned to dig into the soil and find insects even during tough, dry times. Each species became a specialist, perfectly suited to survive in its own niche. Australia's plants also changed. Eucalyptus trees, hardy and able to survive fires, spread widely. Acacias, or wattles, adapted to the dry climate. The whole landscape was being reshaped, not by a sudden disaster, but by a slow shift in climate and isolation. As time moved closer to the present, the the Ice Ages began. These Ice Ages came and went many times over the last 2.6 million years. While thick glaciers covered parts of Europe and North America, Australia experienced colder, drier conditions. There were no great ice sheets covering most of the continent, but the climate became harsher. Rivers and lakes shrank. Deserts expanded even more. Yet life found a way to thrive. During this time, giant animals known as megafauna appeared. Some of them were truly enormous. Diprotodon, a massive relative of the wombat, was the largest marsupial ever known, as big as a small car. Giant kangaroos bounded across the dry plains. Ginornis, a giant flightless bird taller than a person, stalked through grasslands. There were huge lizards like Megalania, which could grow up to 7 meters long, and snakes as thick as tree trunks. Predators roamed, too. The marsupial lion was still a fierce hunter. Large goannas and snakes preyed on smaller animals. But unlike in other parts of the world, there were no large placental predators. No wolves, no big cats, no bears. These ecosystems evolve in their own unique way, shaped by millions of years of isolation. Life in this period was a delicate balance between animals, plants, and the changing environment. Rainfall patterns shifted with each ice age. Some species moved to survive, others adapted in place. Some disappeared forever. The story of Australia's isolation is one of both change and creativity. As the continent drifted alone through the southern oceans, cut off from other lands, its life forms followed their own evolutionary paths. Marsupials became kings of the animal world here. Ancient species like monotremes held on while they vanished elsewhere. Forests gave way to deserts, but life never stopped. It simply transformed. For millions of years, Australia was a world of its own, shaped by drifting continents, changing climates, and unique animals. But then, something entirely new arrived. About 65,000 years ago, long before the pyramids were built, long before cities existed, groups of people looked across the waters of Southeast Asia and saw a new land on the horizon. Back then, sea levels were much lower than today. Australia was not an island. It was joined with New Guinea and Tasmania to form a single massive landmass called Seoul. But even with lower seas, reaching it wasn't easy. People had to cross open water using simple rafts or boats. It was one of the earliest known ocean journeys in human history. These travelers didn't know what they would find, but they sailed anyway, carrying their families, their skills, and their stories. When they arrived, they stepped into a continent full of life. Giant kangaroos hopped across the plains. Massive wombat-like creatures called Diprotodon grazed in herds. Huge flightless birds walked through grasslands, and giant reptiles hunted in the heat. Forests, rivers, and deserts stretched out before them. For these first people, it must have been both strange and full of opportunity. Over generations, they spread across the entire continent, from the tropical north to the cool southern coasts, from wet rainforests to the dry red center. People learned how to live in every kind of environment. They brought knowledge with them, knowledge passed down through stories, songs, and traditions. This knowledge grew and adapted to the land. It helped them find water in deserts, navigate vast spaces, and live in balance with their surroundings. These early Australians were the ancestors of today's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Their cultures are the oldest continuous cultures in the world. Their connection to the land runs deeper than almost anything else on Earth. Through the dreaming, or Dreamtime, they explain the creation of the land, the sky, the animals, and their ancestors. But the dreaming was more than just stories. It was a map of the land, a guide for survival, and a way of understanding how everything is connected. In rock shelters, they painted with ochre, leaving behind handprints, animals, and symbols that speak across thousands of years. Songlines, ancient pathways marked by stories and songs, stretched across the land, connecting people and places over vast distances. By singing these songs, they could navigate across deserts and forests, remembering every waterhole and landmark. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived alongside Australia's unique animals. But things were changing. Around 40,000 years ago, many of the giant species, the megafauna, began to disappear. The reasons are still debated. Some scientists think hunting by humans played a role. Others point to changing climates and the drying of the land. Many believe it was a mix of both. People use controlled fire, a method now called fire stick farming, to shape the land. By burning small areas at certain times, they encouraged new plant growth and attracted animals. This practice also reduced the risk of massive wildfires. Fire stick farming changed landscapes slowly, creating open grasslands and mosaics of different habitats. These changes may have affected where megafauna could live and find food. Whatever the exact cause, the disappearance of the megafauna transformed Australia's ecosystems. Without giant grazers and predators, plants and animals adjusted in new ways. People adapted too, shifting their hunting and gathering strategies. They lived through these changes, just as they had adapted to new climates and environments for thousands of years before. As the Ice Age ended about 10,000 years ago, the world warmed and sea levels began to rise. Water filled the low valleys, cutting Tasmania off from the mainland. New Guinea became a separate island. Australia became an island continent once again, surrounded by ocean on all sides. Even with these big changes, cultures continue to grow and thrive. Across the land, there were over 250 language groups, each with its own traditions and stories. People didn't just survive, they built deep, complex societies. They managed the land carefully, passing on their knowledge through ceremonies and song. The arrival of humans didn't just mark a new chapter in Australia's story, it reshaped it. These people became part of the landscape. Their fires shaped the grasslands. Their stories mapped the stars and rivers. Their presence changed the course of plants and animals for tens of thousands of years. And for all that time, they lived without outside contact. While civilizations rose and fell in other parts of the world, in Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and Europe, the peoples of Australia remained connected to their land in their own way, holding the memory of ancient times in their songs and stories. This chapter of human arrival is not a short moment. It is a deep stretch of time, tens of thousands of years, longer than any empire or kingdom has ever lasted. For most of human history, Australia was home to these first peoples alone. But far across the oceans, change was coming. Explorers were beginning to sail the world. Empires were growing. One day, foreign sails would appear on Australian shores. And with them, the land and its people would face a transformation unlike anything before. For tens of thousands of years, the people of Australia lived on their land, shaping it with fire, story, and care. Then, everything changed. In the late 18th century, sails appeared on the horizon. The world outside had finally reached Australia. In 1770, the British explorer Captain James Cook charted the eastern coast of the continent and claimed it for Britain. 18 years later, in 1788, the first fleet arrived at Botany Bay. These ships carried hundreds of people. Some were officers and soldiers, but most were convicts sent from Britain to build a new penal colony. With them came animals, tools, weapons, and diseases. A new chapter in Australia's history had begun, one that would bring both great change and great pain. The arrival of Europeans happened suddenly compared to the slow pace of geological and cultural change that had come before. For indigenous peoples, who had lived on and cared for this land for more than 60,000 years, it was a shock unlike anything before. Newcomers claimed land that already belonged to others. They cleared forests to make farms. They introduced sheep and cattle, which trampled and ate plants that native animals relied on. Rivers were changed. Landscapes that had evolved over millions of years began to shift at a rapid speed. Even more devastating were the effects on indigenous communities. Diseases brought by Europeans spread quickly and killed many people who had no immunity. Frontier violence, forced removal, and the taking of land followed. Entire ways of life were disrupted. The deep knowledge systems that had cared for the land for generations were ignored or pushed aside. Despite this, indigenous cultures did not disappear. Communities held on to language, story, and identity, often in the face of immense hardship. Many adapted to new realities while continuing to fight for their rights and their land. Their resilience is one of the most powerful threads in Australia's modern story. Over the centuries, Colonies grew along the coasts. Towns became cities. Gold rushes brought waves of migrants. Australia changed from a group of British colonies into a united country, the Commonwealth of Australia, in 1901. Railways spread across the land. Roads cut through forests and deserts. Modern industries rose. The population grew rapidly, mostly along the eastern and southern coasts. Yet beneath this human layer, the ancient land remained. Its rocks still carried memories of supercontinents and ancient seas. Its deserts still told stories of long, slow drying. Its animals, though many now endangered, still showed the results of millions of years of isolation. Even in cities, the shape of the land guided where people built, where rivers ran, and where life gathered. In more recent times, scientists have turned to Australia to study the deep history of our planet. In the Jack Hills, tiny zircon crystals reveal clues about the Earth more than 4 billion years ago. In South Australia, Ediacaran fossils give us glimpses of the first complex animals. In the outback, dinosaur footprints and megafauna bones help us understand ancient ecosystems. And on the coasts and reefs, scientists study how today's changing climate affects life, just as it has many times before. At the same time, indigenous knowledge, built over tens of thousands of years, is being recognized for its incredible value. Traditional fire practices, for example, are being relearned and used to manage land more safely and sustainably. Songlines and oral histories have preserved information about landscapes that changed thousands of years ago, including memories of rising seas that modern science has only recently confirmed. These knowledge systems are not separate from science. They're another way of knowing, one that has helped people live on this land for longer than any other culture in history. Australia today is a mix of the ancient and the modern, the natural and the human. Cities sit on coastlines where rainforest once grew. Highways cross deserts that have been dry for millions of years. Modern industries rely on the minerals hidden deep inside rocks that formed when the Earth was young. The Great Barrier Reef, older than any city, continues to grow and change just as it has for hundreds of thousands of years, even as it faces new challenges from warming oceans. The story of Australia is not a simple line. It is a long, winding journey through time, from fire and stone, to drifting continents, to unique animals, to the arrival of people, and finally to the modern world. At every stage, this land has shaped life, and life has shaped the land. As we look at Australia today, it's easy to think only of its present, its cities, beaches, deserts, and rainforests. But beneath everything lies a history deeper than almost anywhere else on Earth. Its rocks tell the story of the planet's birth. Its fossils tell the story of life's first experiments. Its animals and plants tell the story of evolution in isolation. And its first peoples tell the story of human connection that stretches back more than 60,000 years. This story reminds us that Australia is not just a place. It's a timeline, stretching from the ancient past into the future. It holds lessons about change, survival, and care. It shows us how land and life are connected in powerful ways. And it reminds us that every place we stand is built on countless layers of history. Australia's journey is still unfolding. The continent continues to drift northward. Climates continue to change. People continue to build, adapt, and learn. Just as it has for billions of years, this land listens, remembers, and endures. And so the story ends where it began, with the land itself. Ancient, patient, waiting for the next chapter to be written.